what we've seen and really our evolution, we started from where we saw the pain was most acute. So today we have 24 customers. Every single customer that we support today is a property technology company at various sizes and scales. What I think is probably the essence of being a good founder, which is not falling in love with a specific idea, but rather falling in love with solving problems that people really care about and that you can become passionate about.
Welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
Reid, you would never guess what I was going to talk to you about today, but I think it's something both you and I could benefit from. You know how we've been given feedback? I think it was our producer, Darren, actually. Somebody was like, hey, you guys should smile more. Do you remember this?
I've been told that more than I'd like to admit since we started Digible, so I am going to connect the two.
Okay.
It can be a little stressful starting a business, but yeah, I mean, too many people have told me that lately. So where did the feedback come from? I mean, our facilitator in Boulder told me I had RBF.
Yeah.
And we pay her a decent amount of money, and she was still telling me that. So it's like, good Lord.
Maybe we don't pay her enough money for her to put up with the RBF.
Yeah, that's also possible. Well, where are you going with this?
Well, because we got feedback at some point on the podcast. You're like, we cut out all these shorts and they do really well, but it's really a struggle because you guys, as you're listening to whoever you have on, are just not looking happy. And so we need you guys to smile more and nod along while and I was trying to do this while we were listening to Remen because I love her and he does make me smile.
Yeah.
But man, my cheeks are wearing out and I was like, I also look like a maniac that I'm just like grinning because I can't do like a little like lift and you tell. And I think it's because of the facial hair, like the mustache down into the beard.
It could be.
So what I'm thinking is it was my 9th grade history teacher and I'm bummed that I forget his name, but he came from the makeup industry and he was like, oh, I tell you what, guys, men's makeup it's coming. Like I put money on it in the next 10 years, whatever. Well,
this is hot take.
we're like 20 years past, maybe more than 20 years past at this point from that moment. And I'm still waiting for men's makeup to catch up. But if it's like, the women do the like, thing on their eyes to turn them up. Mm-hmm. We need that for like just the facial hair, like because I can't grow in this spot to make it look like I'm smiling, and I'm not willing to grow out the mustache and do the wax on the end of it so that it pushes it up.
Well, I lost the beard, and I don't think it's helped me all that much. I think I said last time we were in Boulder, I said I'm going to be work the smirk.
Oh,
and so that is still in the back of my head. I'm trying to at least offer some type of smirk and not in an irritating or creepy way.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to start getting feedback from our guests.
I guess so. I need to look for examples. My coach does this. They're often like, what are some people you look up to? And I struggle with that, but I need to find examples of like, for a second, I was like, does Anderson Cooper smile? But I feel like if you're a newscaster, you're allowed to have the scowl. Mm-hmm. So maybe you and I are just in the wrong profession.
Yeah.
We need to like
the furrowed brow and the scowl because it's investigative, type stuff. Yeah. Where you're really trying to go deep. I don't know.
Well, I'm just trying
You're not helping my complex out. I can tell you that.
Yeah, well, I'm worn out. I get no more smiles the rest of the day for me because I spin them. So
glad we have our one-on-one after this.
Yeah.
Try to keep that in mind.
We have Remen on today, who is awesome. Like we met him maybe a year and a half or so ago, and spent some good time with him at NAA and Proptech, and then had him at the summit, which we were so grateful that he could come. And now good to catch up with him. But yeah, I'll quickly summarize, like they're trying to be, he said integration as a service for multifamily. So if you are a vendor or if you have a vendor that needs to integrate with something, they basically do that work for you. And I've just been really, really impressed with how he's conducted himself and what the company's done so far. So I'm really pulling for them. I say pulling for them as if they need my pull. They don't need my pull at all.
But they're easy. He is easy to root for. I mean, the solution itself and what they're trying to accomplish is so valuable to the industry. And so from that standpoint, I'm got my pom-poms out, but it's much easier when you have somebody that just seems like such a great guy. Super bright, has clearly done his homework on the industry and I think is thinking about things, the right way.
And we forgot to give him kudos. So now we'll do it.
Did we?
But when he's I say I, but whatever. He was the start of the chain of events for us getting Aaron, our CTO.
I had no idea.
Yeah. I reached out to him.
Huge shout out, Remen.
I reached out to him and like everyone else we knew and was like, we are looking, could you please help? And he connected us with the person that runs that networking group locally. That guy that sent us like
so
6 people or
clutch.
something.
Yeah, it was more than 6. They were great candidates.
Yeah.
So I did not know that. Thank you for that. I'm gonna send you some more chocolate. I think he got that from he's on that short list of the other company. So remember he said chocolate bar and something else.
Ven.
Yeah.
Like he's on Ven's Christmas card list and he got chocolates from them.
He's officially on Digible.
He needs more than a chocolate bar. That was so helpful.
Totally.
All right. Well, anything else you want to hit in this intro before we get into the...
No, I don't think so. Definitely wanted to tune into though.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, Remen. We appreciate it. And hope you guys enjoyed this conversation with Remen. Okay. We're here with Remen. Remen, I didn't tell you this ahead of time because I wasn't going to make you try to have me pronounce your name. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, what you do.
I'm so glad before you respond to this that he acknowledged that, because it's hit or miss whether David goes ahead and includes the last name. But you shouldn't feel special or singled out because he'll do this at random. Your last name might be Smith, and he might ask how you pronounce that, or he might just move straight past it and just use your first name.
There's one Remen in my life, and that's it. There's no more room. Out of spots.
Oh, I'm right there with you. You are one of one, my friend. But you got to give us now your pronunciation of your last name.
Of course. So Remen, which you nailed, and then my last name is Okoruwa.
Just like
I would have been close. I think the U before the W would have gotten me. But I would have been close. Yeah. I wouldn't have nailed though to your verbiage. All right. Well, Remen, tell us how you got here. What do you do?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder and CEO of Propexo, and Propexo is an integration as a service platform that helps Proptech companies as well as property owners and managers to connect their technology and tools with the data that's really locked away inside of property management software. So working with our unified API, we're typically helping customers reduce their time to get an integration live by anywhere between 4 to 12 weeks. And we're also dramatically reducing the amount of engineering, time, and talent required to get these integrations done.
That's very eloquent. I'm not surprised because you come from outside the industry, as I remember, and then you came in. We had you on one of our panels at the summit last year. But maybe give us, how did you get here? Because most people, I think, are sucked into the gravitational pull of property management, can't leave. You somehow directed your spaceship at the gravity of property management. So why don't you give us that history?
Yeah, so it definitely was you know what they say, it's like if you aim for the moon, you'll land among the stars. So when I came in, definitely wasn't aiming to build an API business that sits on top of property management software. Rather, I was previously a product manager at HubSpot, which is a marketing technology company here in Boston. And one of the things I'd experienced after living in Boston for many years was that there were a ton of landlords who were still collecting rent as checks. I had personally paid rent checks to landlords for 7+ years. And it was something that I found really frustrating, as did my co-founder, Ben, who was also a HubSpot product manager living in the Boston area. So we had this amazing idea of building a rent payment app that would either send digital payments to the landlords who wanted it, or if the landlord really insisted on receiving a rent check, we would actually handle the fulfillment of that rent check while the resident could still pay on their phone via ACH or with a card. So that was the original idea. And we took that product live and were practically marketing it for a few months. But then we discovered something else really interesting. So we started talking with property managers, and we would always ask these property managers, hey, what would it take for you to use this really cool, slick rent payment app we built? And the first question out of their mouths is probably something that a lot of other Proptech founders might empathize with. do you integrate with X? Now, sometimes that X would be RealPage or Entrada or Buildium or Propertyware. But every meeting, it felt that we were quickly coming to learn that it wasn't enough to have a great product. What you actually needed was to have a great product that talked with the system of record that these property managers relied upon. And once we started talking more with Proptechs, understanding how they were doing these integrations, we quickly realized that a lot of Proptechs, even though they need the integrations, they don't have as many integrations as they want. And that means that they can't effectively sell into this really broad market. And it was really with those insights in tow, we slightly shifted our gears, moved away from the rent payment business, and instead became laser focused on building the Propexo you see today. So building out the most robust set of integrations possible, while at the same time trying to unify all those APIs. So it doesn't feel like you're integrating into 5 or 6 different systems, but rather it feels like you're building one integration that gives you access to everything you care about.
Yeah, I appreciate it. If I remember the timeline on that, it was like 3 years ago, maybe. Is that fair?
Yeah. So close. We started the rent payment app business back in 2021. So actually, that's about 3 years ago. We left our jobs at HubSpot in fall of 21, and then did the rent payment thing full time up through summer of 22. And then it was that summer that we had the blinding insight about the property management integrations, and then we shifted gears, and we're doing that beginning really in summer 22.
So I recently heard, it's funny, I was listening to an interview with Tony Robbins, and he was talking about a meeting he had with Gorbachev. And he wanted to ask Gorbachev, what was the single moment that the Cold War ended? There's always one moment that leads to everything else. And Gorbachev was giving him the average, we worked on it together and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no. There was a single moment. And now I have to finish the story. But basically, Robbins said that he pestered Gorbachev for a 4-hour plane ride. And at the end of the 4 hours of the plane ride, Gorbachev was finally like, you know what? I figured it out. It was when, Reid, help me. Who was the president? With the Reagan. Yeah. He said I thought it was Reagan. I just didn't want to be wrong. Reagan was right before my consciousness. Anyways, Reagan was fighting with him in a meeting and got up to storm out of the meeting and then turned around and was like, hang on, let's start over. My name's Ronald. What's your name? And that's when Gorbachev said that was the moment for him. He's like, oh, this could work. This is human. This is another person. We're going to make this work. And it took him another 6 or 9 months or whatever. But I'm wondering what your moment was. So you guys were at HubSpot. You did product over there. You must have been highly convicted to do this rent payment thing. And then you leave your job to do it. And then somewhere in the next 9 months, you're like, shoot, we need to change. So what was the moment for you where you're like, it's time to switch course?
Yeah. So I think that after doing the payments business for a bit, I think candidly, it was a combination of two things. One, the realization that most payments businesses are high volume, low margin, which means that in order to get any reasonable amount of revenue, you need to be processing not just a few $1 million of rent payments, but tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of rent payments just to get some amount of meaty revenue. But I think that the other piece, and I think this sort of speaks to what I think is probably the essence of being a good founder, which is not falling in love with a specific idea, but rather falling in love with solving problems that people really care about and that you can become passionate about. What we quickly discovered with this rent payment app after doing it for a few months was that before we launched this business, we spoke with a lot of people who complained about paying rent with checks. They complained about the frustration of buying the envelopes and the stamps and mailing it out to the landlord or walking to a physical drop box. But what we didn't quite see once we had a product live was people who were willing to pay money to make this supposed problem go away. And it really reminds me of a line. So we actually, I can tell you a little bit more about this later, but we did Y Combinator for the new business Propexo. But we actually applied to Y Combinator with the old business and were rejected. And something that came to mind that one of our interviewers said to us was that when we were applying to YC, told him the business, told him about all of our growth, but told him about some of our monetization challenges. We could only do this as freemium. We weren't seeing a lot of uptick on the paid features. What this gentleman said was, hey, guys, it seems like you found a problem that people are going to complain about, but they're never going to pay you for. And those are the worst problems to solve because you'll always get signal that this is a good idea. Everyone's going to tell you it's a great idea. But when the rubber meets the road, it's a nice to have, not a need to have. And I encourage you to go find a need to have problem. That was like, holy crap. I respect YC. I really want to be at YC. And when someone at YC is telling me that my business idea is bad and you're not solving a real problem, like that was something that we didn't move away from the rent payment idea immediately after that interview, but it was only a couple months later that we came to the exact same conclusion. So I think that for us was that turning point where we were seeing it in the data, but then someone sat down and said the words, and it became clear to us.
Mm-hmm. I love that you actually got to one moment because I was already thinking, do I force him to follow up because he's not giving me a single moment? But I love that you got there, so thank you. All right, before I pass it to Reid, I feel like Reid, you may have poked him on, or if I don't ask it, you will ask it, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Remen, could you tell us about the rebrand? I know you said, because every time I go to like recommend you to another like company, because I'm like, integrations stink in this industry, you got to just talk to Remen. I have to Google your old company name before the rebrand to eventually find you, just because it hasn't stuck for me. So yeah, tell us about the rebrand.
Totally. First of all, I'm going to say great minds think alike. And in our case, what happened, there is currently a single family rental property management software company that happens to go by our old name of Propify. So because there were two companies with the same name in largely the same space, we were actually seeing significant market confusion. We know that their side was seeing some of the same. So we would get people who came to us saying like, hey, you guys are an SFR PM software, correct? And we're like, no, we're not. We were seeing a lot of confusion in the market based on that. And what we opted to do was to just go out, change the name, and make it really, really clear that, hey, like, yes, our name has changed, but this is now a brand that we can fully own. So that's really the genesis of the change from Propify to Propexo.
So Nicole and I both went to Fordham University in New York, and there's a story there that Fordham originally had crimson as its color, and so did Harvard. And so Fordham and Harvard were like, great, we will settle this by playing a basketball game, and whoever wins will keep the color. Fordham won the basketball game. They did not get to keep the color. So that has shaped my opinion of Harvard. Thank you very much. But Remen, did you have a basketball game, arm wrestling competition?
I was wondering if it was a coin toss. Like, how did you settle who was going to make the change?
Yeah, so I wish, a basketball game would have been much more enjoyable for both parties, I imagine. But unfortunately, it was a lot more boring and involved a lot more lawyers. Yeah. So it was much more of a back and forth between our legal representation to figure out the amicable path forward.
Yeah, I had a feeling. I was not sure actually how to pronounce. Sounds funny, but
Propexo? Yeah,
well, I thought it was Propexo instead of Propexo. Yeah. So we didn't intend to spend probably this much time on this, but help me understand Propexo.
Yeah. So I wish that there was some like deep meaning behind Propexo, but I would tell you how we got this name. We decided to set out some criteria of what we want our new name to be. One, we like Propify because we like the idea of having prop in the name for businesses in the real estate space. So we're going to keep prop. But two, we wanted to have something where we could get the trademark on the name. And there weren't any other companies in the space that were sort of adjacent to us that might have a claim, because that was something we had recently dealt with. But finally, and this is something that I've learned, something that like is a bit of a philosophical thing, but we wanted the name to actually have no meaning whatsoever. So because that then gives our brand the space to occupy and build all the meaning around it. So the reason we like Propexo is that it's only 3 letters off of Propify, and it has no particular meaning whatsoever, and it has prop in it. We ran through a handful of other names that also checked those boxes, and Propexo was the winner.
But here's the thing: it means something to you, deep in your heart. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well, Rem, for those listening, if you can't tell, we really like Remen, so you should go do business with him, because I love that he's like honest, like and authentic with his answers, and he doesn't mind when it doesn't seem like some grand. Well, he did talk about landing amongst the stars, but outside of that, he's backtracked a bit.
Yeah. We love the honesty.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would say you have prop anymore if it's Propexo. I think you have pro in there, but I'm not sure if you can still say you have prop based on the pronunciation. But anyways, I'll stop giving you shit about this. Let's move on. I want to ask a pretty salient, I guess, or pointed question to you. You said that the payment app, you got the advice from Y Combinator not to be focusing on something that causes a lot of friction and complaints, but isn't something somebody would pay for. I want to know how, I guess, you've moved on to something that part of me worries is similar. And I say this because, when we've talked to some others with similar, I guess, goals or ambition, or anytime I feel like we get into integrations at large around, Proptech, it's like everybody knows this is a huge problem, but how do you really build a business on it? And that gets into who's going to pay for it, and are there enough people paying for it? So the second part of that question, in a way that maybe will set you up well for this, is who do you feel right now does need this the most? Because I think you mentioned owners, there's the prop tech companies themselves, there's vendors like Digible, and that's certainly not the only use cases, but integrations in general are badly needed in this industry. Who do you think needs it the most? Who's going to basically fund this or help support this business model?
Yeah, really, really great question, Reid. And I think that what we've seen in really our evolution, we started from where we saw the pain was most acute. So today we have 24 customers. Every single customer that we support today is a property technology company at various sizes and scales. So we work with Level, which is an access control solutions company. We work with Celery, which is an emerging document fraud detection business as well. And I think that what's interesting is if we just take those 2 companies, Celery, very early stage startup. Level has been in the market for, I believe, nearly a decade. I think their last fundraising round was a Series C. But what unifies both these businesses is that for them, whether it's being able to pull down the resident list so you can know which residents should have access and be able to swipe into a building, or on the document fraud side, being able to push the results of a screening into the property management system so the leasing team actually knows, okay, can this person pass go and actually submit an application? All of them need to touch the data that's inside the property management system, whether it's pulling it out or pushing it back in. And what we've seen is that our initial hypothesis and our initial focus has been on selling those integration services to the property technology firms, because typically the onus of building an integration and proving that it works goes to the property technology firms. And we'd experienced firsthand that sometimes you have all the will to build these integrations on your own, but you might not have the technical capabilities in-house or really even the time to do so. Because like, we work with some very large companies that have engineering teams larger than our entire company. But the value we bring to them is the fact that we are only focusing on building these integrations. And we're focused on not just building an integration that works for one use case, but integrations that scale across multiple use cases and multiple property management systems.
Cool. Well, very helpful. Second question is scope creep related to integrations. People asking for, we also need, this data. So that API solved that, but we need this. And then as Proptech continues to grow, which we've seen it, multiply quite a bit. How are you guys managing that as far as expectations and then the amount of time and effort you have to put on the maintenance of these integrations versus adding new ones, lighting up new ones as the industry continues to expand?
Yeah, so really great question, Reid. And the way we generally think about this is that there's always a balancing act. So January of 2023, we supported really one integration that was Buildium, and we supported it because it was an open API. So it's like we could just build against that. Today, we support integrations into 8 PM systems, including RealPage and Entrata. Still have the Buildium integration, but we've really started to round it out with more systems too. And along the way, we don't just pull properties, units, leases, and tenants, which is our initial set of data, but now we have applicants, applications, leads, and guest cards. Events tied to those leads and guest cards, work orders, vendors, invoices. Like, we know that if we want to succeed and we really want to transform how people build integrations, we almost need our business to be an abstraction of really most of the data that's accessible inside of a property management system, which means that what I think some folks might say is could feel like scope creep. We typically see as, this is an opportunity to get paid to build out a data model that we don't yet have, learn exactly how a real Proptech would want to use it, and then we can start delivering that for future customers. And I think that each time a customer comes to us and forces us to build out a new integration, we get really excited because that means that the next Proptech that comes with a similar use case, we now have a ton of expertise to bring to bear.
Cool. One more, and then I'll turn it back to David. But since you mentioned success, you didn't explicitly define it, but I will ask you to. What does success look like for Propexo? I'm going to say 3 years from now.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the joke, I would say, I would hold back. I have a joke, but I will save that for after the camera stops rolling. I think for us, success has two axes: what we do and who we serve. In terms of what we do, I want us, we have 8 property management systems today. There are more property management tools that we don't yet support fully that I want to be a part of our bundle. Similarly, there are data models inside of those property management systems that I want us to support. So to be really concrete, we don't yet have an AppFolio integration. People ask about AppFolio all the time. I want to be able to tell people, yeah, we integrate with AppFolio too. So adding more systems and then adding more data models within those systems is a big thing. But I think that there's this other axis of who we serve. And this gets back to your original question, Reid, about, hey, is this for PropTechs? Is this for the owners and operators? Right now, we've been focusing on the problem for PropTechs, which is namely, we need to integrate with a lot of different systems, and we might need to do so relatively fast or with re-engineering resources that don't necessarily want to get into the nitty-gritty of integrations. However, I think that as I go on and I meet more property owners and property managers, they have their own data problems that aren't quite the same as what PropTechs are dealing with, but there's a lot of similarities. And I think that 3 years out, I really want to be in a position where we're not just helping PropTechs integrate into these systems, but we're also helping property owners and property managers provision access to their own data in a secure way, in a way that really allows them to get even more value from the Proptechs that they choose to engage with. Because I think that sometimes, like when we started, I used to think that APIs were the end all and be all of integration. But I now see that there's a lot of really compelling ways to be getting data out of these systems that allow property owners and managers to see a lot more success. And I think that being able to help them in those journeys is something we're also really excited to do over the coming years.
Cool.
Would you say more about that, maybe by way of an example?
Totally. Yeah. So one of the things that like we've seen is that for Proptechs who actually we have there's a Proptech client that we're currently speaking with. And this Proptech client, they're currently integrated with one of the property management systems. And what they found is that while the property management system API gives them some of the data that they want, it doesn't give them all of the data. And this is not just a point of friction between them and that particular property management system, but it's actually a point of friction for them and their customer, a large recognizable REIT. So the REIT says, we're not getting the data we want. The Proptech is saying we're not getting the data we want, but the property management system, because they have a lot of other priorities to juggle on the API side, they're not changing their API anytime soon. So we're now exploring a potential pilot where we could work and take advantage of tools like ETL to supplement the data that's already coming out via the API. But now it really is going to allow both the Proptech to deliver better service to the REIT and the REIT to get exactly what they want from the integrated vendor that they're using.
So it sounds like what you're describing is less that, let's just say that there's a PMS system. It's less that the PMS system doesn't have it. It's that they haven't formatted the data in the way to provide it to the Proptech or to the REIT, right? So even if the REIT was directly hooked into the API, they couldn't get what they wanted. And so you guys may help transform the data or whatever to provide what is missing.
Exactly. I think that like one thing to keep in mind is that there are a lot of APIs, but these APIs, there's always constraints, and the data that's sitting directly in any property management system is going to be much greater and much more rich than what's going to be made available in an API. So this is really speaking to this idea of supplementing what you're already getting out of the API, because like, we want to enable the best Proptech experiences possible for our customers. And I think that like sometimes relying solely on the API just isn't going to be the right way to do that. In a similar way, there are really great tools out there like Revolutionise, which focuses on like reporting for property managers, property operations, and asset managers. And frequently, the technique that Liz and her team would be using there would be an ETL rather than an API. And that's not an accident. That's because like, if you really want all the underlying raw data, then the ETL is frequently going to be the best way to do that. And I think that that's really a feather we're looking to add to our cap as we're looking to serve a broader set of use cases.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I don't envy you because the amount of expertise you guys would have to understand for each system. I mean, you guys will have to become like experts in every one of the systems. Because I think about like Google Analytics, like companies that like Google Analytics doesn't necessarily give all or did not previously give all the raw data. And so they would give you like something that's already been calculated. And then people would pull out of it into like Data Studio or something else. And then they would be like dividing by some other outcome by something else that now gives them the totally false assumption because of how the data at the source had been calculated by analytics itself. And that's just one system. Now imagine trying to do that like from somebody that's on analytics and someone else that's on Adobe and someone else that's on Heap, and then trying to understand all those underlying things and how they're calculating them, because they most likely won't give you the raw data. And therefore you have to understand like, oops, this dimension is not allowed to be, you can't use that over here, when you're trying to standardize your tech stack, because it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be a journey for us. And I think the way that we're going to do it, it's very similar to how we approach the API stuff. One system at a time. let's get good at let's really knock out the use case for one system. And then we can sort of move on to the next set of ETL opportunities. One thing I think is also interesting here is that when it comes to this ETL flavor of sort of like data movement, this is something where frequently if we just knock out one of the really, really big systems like the names I mentioned earlier, there's a huge market just getting really, really good at, let's say, a RealPage or Entrada if they were to offer an ETL. So we think that we don't necessarily have to move as fast and have like 8 different ETLs set up in the next 12 months, the way we got 8 different APIs plugged in within about 12 months. But we can be a little bit more methodical, get really, really good at this. And with that expertise we're bringing to bear, make sure that for the companies who take advantage of that tooling and tech, we're really knocking it out of the park for their specific use cases.
Cool. Well, who's a really good fit for you guys right now versus who maybe it's a little bit early or just not currently a good fit as you guys stand today?
Yeah, so really great question. As I mentioned, we work with tech companies in the Proptech space from all different sizes and shapes. I really think it comes down to use cases. So today, we're working with access control. Like we have a handful of customers that do access control. We have a handful of customers that are on the, I'll say, maintenance, make ready, unit turnover spectrum, including also rental inspections. We also have a handful of companies that do like tenant screening, rental applications. So, we are seeing some clusters sort of between maintenance, access control, tenant screening and applications, but we have loads of other data models that we're building out, and we have some newer customers who are taking advantage of these other data models. So beyond those clusters I mentioned, I would say that if you're really interested in understanding, hey, can we help you out? Just reach out and we can sort of walk you through. Here's what our APIs cover today, and here are some of the customers we're working with that we're delivering that value for right now.
Yeah, likewise, if you're on the property management side and your vendor says, oh, we don't integrate with AppFolio, right, or whatever yet, tell them to get in touch with Remen and perhaps they could be a solve. Because I know for us in the early days, I remember back in 2019 when we were first building out Fiona, they were like, oh, do you connect with this CRM or this PMS system? And I'd be like, no. And frankly, it's going to take us, like you mentioned, reducing time by 12 weeks. I feel like you would have reduced our time had you been around in 2019. You probably would have reduced it by more like 18 months or something. Mostly because our team, we were so lean and we had so many things on the priority board that were changing. And it's like we were trying to juggle paying customers versus potential customers. And to be able to, if we could have just been let's go to one spot, and then, you guys will help us take care of the rest. It would have saved a lot of headaches and really sped us up far more than the 12 weeks that you were talking about earlier. But that was us. I have one other question, and then I'll turn it back. You had mentioned to us offline before we recorded that you guys were SOC 2 compliant. And there's a lot of, when I've talked to other folks in the space, they actually didn't even know what SOC 2 was when I brought it up, because we've had just 2 large customers that have asked us to do SOC 2. And I'll often say, okay, cool. Tell me more about that. Why do you want this done? Mostly because it's a bear and it's very expensive. And when I asked the management companies about why they wanted us to do it, they're like, oh, well, we have that in all of our contracts for our vendors these days because I don't know, legal says it was a good idea. And I was like, well, do they understand we're not touching PII or we're not? And once we got into it, they're like, oh, okay. I didn't realize that. No, you don't need to do this. Okay, forget about it. But at the time when we were getting questioned on it, I was asking all my vendor friends, like, hey, do you guys have this? And I had not met another company that had SOC 2 done yet. So that's why I'm very curious what led you guys to do it. And then, you could brag a little bit, just the fact that you have the badge. I assume the certificate went on your refrigerator at home because it's that important.
I got it tattooed.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'll have to, if we don't assuming we get it renewed, I'll just keep it right there. But
okay.
Yeah. So SOC 2, I think that one thing that makes us a little different from, let's say, other prop techs is that fundamentally, while we happen to be in the property technology space, we're actually just a data company. And if you look at companies that are primarily focused on data movement, SOC 2 is a very, very sort of like standard step that folks have to go through. And I think that we also do move quite a bit of PII through our pipes because, you can integrate you can pull all the guest card, all the resident information. And sometimes that might include social security numbers and other really, really sensitive information. So for us, we really did recognize early on that especially as we think about trying to engage with larger clients, the SOC 2 certification is an important one to give our partners confidence that we're going to take their data seriously. And I think that one of the things that's also like really interesting, I've been reading various NMHC market reports, and one of the biggest growth cost drivers for owners and operators today are cybersecurity insurance premiums. So there's actually a growing sense that, hey, data breaches super expensive, and therefore there's a greater desire to see vendors in the tech stack say that, hey, we're not going to be the reason why you end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because like thousands or hundreds of thousands of resident records got leaked on the internet.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was more thinking of another joke, like if we aim for the stars on this one, so we would aim for the Times, but I think we would land up on the Wall Street Journal when we foul up. So
I will say one thing I'll also throw on the SOC 2 piece. We actually are now in conversations with a insurance company prospective client, and it's actually a requirement for all of their vendors that there is you're SOC 2 certified, and I don't think they do any exceptions. So there's definitely, I think that what we've seen is that there tends to be a size of organization or a type of organization where this is a hard and fast rule, and you don't pass go until you get it done.
I think it was super smart for you guys to get done because if you're the piping, you don't want to. It's like I don't know, if Stripe didn't have like SSL, it'd be like, okay, that seems like a very low bar to achieve. Go ahead and do it if you're going to be the pipe, right? And so you never want to be the reason someone decides to integrate with you. You guys finally close the sale. They go to like sign a customer. The customer asks about SOC 2 and they're like, what? And then they find out, you guys aren't. That would be just such a bad look. So I think you guys have to take it, incredibly seriously. And it makes a ton of sense. Although I feel the pain for you guys because of the expense.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny to bring that up, David. Now that you say it, I do remember we have actually lost deals because we were not SOC 2 certified. Because one of the things that happens if you are SOC 2 certified, then any vendors in your data pipeline must also be certified, or else that will show up and will count against you the next time you get audited. So for certain companies that also process sensitive data, they literally cannot work with us if we don't get the certification. So
Makes sense.
I mean, it was painful, but I will say there are now some really, really great companies out there that make the SOC 2 process. It's never going to be easy, but they dramatically expedite it. So we use an organization called Vanta.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Vanta, they are awesome. I've also heard really, really great things about Drata. That's DRATA. So a handful of folks that I know from Y Combinator, they swear by Drata. But really between Vanta or Drata, I don't think you're going to go wrong with either.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I knew Vanta. I didn't know of Drata, so I'll have to keep them on my radar. That's really interesting.
Sounds like a derivative of a certain property management company we know in the industry. So I have, I think we have room for three of these questions. One's going to bring us back a little bit to the problem that you guys are trying to solve, that thread. But I'm actually going to go more founder to founder on this one. I'm curious, when Dave and I first met you and people were asking about, at the time, Propify, now Propexo, who you guys were, one of the things that we would say to try and help out, not necessarily exactly how you would have wanted us to position it, but Zapier for Proptech or multifamily. And I'm kind of seeding this by asking, since you came from out of industry, was there a company that you were looking to emulate, saw as a role model in starting your company? And if not, is there one that you've kind of discovered since you started your business within the industry that you really, I don't know if look up to is the right way of putting it, but yeah, I'm just curious if there's been some companies with Y Combinator also as kind of one of the, I guess, funding you guys. I'm sure you've been introduced to some great entrepreneurs along the way.
Yeah, really great question. And yes, we definitely took a lot of inspiration from a lot of companies. And I think that, because we're newbies to Proptech, like a lot of what we were doing with our initial vision for Propexo and then sort of the type of product we want to build was, we used Stripe, we used Plaid, we used Zapier before. And we're like, what makes these companies great is that they have like really clear, transparent public API documentation. It's really slick and clean and it feels modern. And I think that one of the biggest pieces that then builds on top of that all is that these are companies that are taking either like a bunch of legacy systems that are really opaque and hard to understand, and they're just trying to figure out how do we digest that for you and make it really easily intelligible for someone who doesn't necessarily want to learn the intricacies of like the bank cores to understand how money movement works. But what they do know they want is they want to be able to pull some transactions out of your bank account, and they want to be able to push a payment to someone who sends you a charge. And I think that ethos of seeing these API first technology companies that had come into financial services, a very traditional and honestly a fairly like tech backwards industry, but had made it accessible and easy to work with for a whole new generation of technology firms. And at this point, really just like any company that needs to move money or touches on financial services, that we saw that, we're like, that's really cool. If we can have a fraction of that impact in the real estate space, we will have done a really great thing.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So part two of that kind of founding question is one of the things a lot of entrepreneurs seem to miss. And I don't know if we missed it or we just couldn't afford it, because I know that's often part of the equation here. But in educating an industry about a new company, a lot of entrepreneurs, even those that are funded, don't spend a lot of energy on marketing. How to tell that story, what's the strategy to get the word out. And I think you've done from what I can tell, just a great job kind of, I don't know if I call it grassroots, but you're clearly networking really, really effectively among your peers. And fortunately, that does seem to be your target market. But just wondering if you could share a little bit more as you reflect on some of these other companies that kind of inspired you and that you drew, some benefit from in the model that you're creating. What can you share with us about what you've learned in educating this industry about Propexo?
Yeah, so here I think that I can speak to that category of companies I just described. I think that a lot of them won and continue to win because they, I'm a HubSpot guy. HubSpot's big on inbound marketing, content marketing. What's interesting, when you have a technical product like an API, the content marketing that resonates with the audience frequently isn't going to be a blog post, but your public API documents. That's what the engineers are going to look at first to figure out, hey, can you actually solve my use case? And then when they look at it and say like, oh, wow, this is really easy to understand. It's much clearer and more comprehensive than the docs I've seen that are coming directly from the property management systems. Like that's how you actually go and sell a technical product. And I think that like a part of our ethos coming from HubSpot is that I've always believed that great content wins, but I've had to expand the definition of what is the content I'm putting out into the world. So our our documentation has had multiple iterations. Every time it sort of levels up, I get really excited because I know that that's going to be the first touch point for us and for a lot of the people who are discovering us for the very first time. But with that, I'm also a guy who came from HubSpot. So there are some more traditional forms of content marketing that I believe are really, really important. One of those is, and this is something that's been a more recent development for us, is social media marketing, and in particular, LinkedIn. So I used to be a big, let's rip out a bunch of blog posts, blog. If you looked at the old Rent Drop blog, we were putting out maybe like 3 articles a week for over 6 months. So it was like really consistent pace. However, Proptech is a slightly different market than a broad rent payment, sort of like people who pay rent. That's sort of everyone. In Proptech, especially multifamily Proptech, there's a limited universe of companies and potential buyers for what we're selling. And almost all of them are on LinkedIn and are using LinkedIn to network with others in the space. So what we've opted to do from a strategic perspective is invest heavily on LinkedIn, connecting with folks that resonate with our message, and then really using them to amplify the message even further. So this isn't something like HubSpot, the classical canonical recommendation would be create a blog and then post on your blog as many times a week as you can. But I actually believe that the audience that we want to sell to is on LinkedIn. And then the best way to sell to them isn't to constantly push, hey, this is what we do, this is what we do, this is what we do, but rather talk about topics that we have some expertise in or that are generally interesting to the industry, and then let them come and discover, hey, this is like Remen as a founder, he talks about integrations, he talks about property management software, he talks about data and centralization, all of which are really hot topics. And when you do that double click into what we're all about, people figure out that, oh, and his company does integrations as well. And I think that building of a personal brand around me that can be people's gateway into Propexo is a strategy that we've seen dividends paid from that, and we're going to continue doing going forward.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome kind of tip or insight for other founders, at least in your realm within this industry, because a lot of times they just kind of spray and pray, go to the conferences, hope that they'll make enough noise, or they focus too much on the what. So I think that's really, really smart that you're paying more attention, not just to LinkedIn, but exactly the kind of content that would land with the people that you're obviously trying to influence. Before I finish up, I guess, with my last question, I don't know if you had a comment on that. Just on his approach with the marketing. Okay. I don't know if you're leaning into that. So on the problem itself, how would you score it if I broke it down 2 ways to how many people really recognize the problem? You know, as far as your target market, is it like everybody or most people, some people, a few? So just think in those terms as far as how many people actually are recognize the problem. And then the second part of that maybe is the more important part, which relates to whether they'll pay, but how they would size the problem, like meaning super painful, you know, desperate to find a solution, somewhat painful, need a solution, versus the bottom, which I know you're trying to make sure you stay away from, which is it'd be nice to have. So if you could break it down in those 2 realms, like how many people really recognize this, Remen, within your target market, and then how do you think they would weight the severity of the problem?
Yeah, really, really good questions. So first, how many people recognize it? You know, I'd say it's a 90-10 split. 90% of folks we talk to will say integrations are terrible. They're extremely hard to build. They're time consuming. They break all the time. We wish there was something better. So when it comes to, hey, like, do people think this is a real problem? This truly is something where I can say, don't integrations stink? And then I can get a room of heads to just start nodding. Mm-hmm. However, now we have to factor in the timing. Because frequently I will say that 2 companies have already built out all the integrations that they need. So is this a problem that is painful and that they would want to offload to a third party? That's where things get interesting. So what we've seen is that sometimes, like when we look at the customers that we win, some of these are really new startups who are familiar with tools like Plaid, like Stripe, like Zapier. And they say, from day one, we want to build on a platform that is built to scale, that we know can give us access to all the integrations we could ever care about. And we would rather start early, building the right way, than sort of do a few of these integrations, realize we don't like it, and then come to you and effectively have 2 different systems we're attempting to maintain. So really early stage folks who are getting just started from day one. That's one category of customer we win a lot. But the other category, interestingly enough, are people with about anywhere between 2 to 4 integrations. And that's the space of you built out just enough to know how hard the problem is. But frequently what we see for companies in that category is that they built these integrations effectively as one-offs. So they never tried to unify their integrations or the capabilities. So let's say that they have a RealPage, a Buildium, and a Yardi, for instance. Every integration was built by a different set of engineers, and it just works well enough to make that one integration work. But what happens is frequently software engineers leave the company, and then this integration that becomes a black box. No one on the company or the team really understands it. Everyone's afraid to touch it, because if they touch it and something breaks, there isn't really anyone in-house who has the expertise required to make that integration work again. So what we've actually seen is that we're also able to get business from companies who've built out many integrations and have had functioning integrations for years, because they're actually interested in a refactor. So integrations that aren't quite working, and that they would love to have a new baseline that they say, hey, we trust this, we have a deep understanding of the code, and we know that this will be performant. And they're willing to actually sort of build out an integration through us, and then turn off an integration that was running behind the scenes. And those companies, they also get really excited by the fact that we support 8 systems. So when they land net new systems and clients that they want to integrate, they know that they can grow with us into property management systems that they haven't yet done before.
Okay, sounds familiar.
Yeah.
I don't know that we identify as Proptech per se, but I think we're in the camp you just described, although it's improving. But, certainly when we were first getting going, as David was saying with Fiona, everybody was asking us who we were connected with. And so it's kind of like these one-offs and running super lean. So we weren't able to maintain the maintenance. And then if somebody left, everybody was holding their breath, as far as what might get exposed. So totally get it. I said that was probably my last question. This is a pretty fast one. How do you close? Do you close more on opportunity? Meaning if you have somebody at the tail end of the sales cycle, what gets them over? Is it like FOMO, where it's like, think of all the contracts that you could be getting? So I'm just curious, what does it take to get somebody over the finish line, get that close?
Yeah, it's a pain. So I'm not going to lie. I don't know if you studied Sandler method, the pain funnel. We close on a paid sale. Usually the people who close quickly, they made a promise to some property manager, and they said, yeah, this integration, it will definitely be live and working in the next 30 days. And then you know what? They got someone to sign, and then they're like, oh shit. Now we actually have to deliver a functional integration in order to make this client really happy. So right. I actually think that because these integrations are so vital, not just from an engineering perspective, but actually from a sales perspective, I think that we really help the engineering team cash the checks that the sales team is writing.
Love it. Cool.
It'd be kind of fun if you could, well, I don't know. I mean, after you've proven it with one integration or something, that's a nice expansion sale opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. Is that you're like, hey, now that we've proven ourselves, because I could imagine people that aren't using you are like, well, shoot, now I'm betting my company on, Remen's team, and are they going to be here? For us, our success on the tech side came from just surviving long enough that people are like, oh, you guys have proven that you're not going to just go away. So anyways, when I could see that there being an objection there, but once you could get them to do one of them, then it's great. Now this is part of your upsell opportunity, whoever vendor is just say you integrate with all these platforms now because we've proven we can do this in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Actually, I have a story about this. This actually has happened exactly as described. We had one of the companies we signed last summer. They built out an integration into one PMS with us. It took them about a month to get it done. The next system that they integrated, they got the API credentials and they had a functional integration within 24 hours.
Wow.
it was such a fast turnaround that we actually were contacted by the integrations team of that property management software company. And they're like, we've never seen this before. Like usually like we give you the credentials and then 3-4 months later, you come back and say like, yeah, we're ready. But like this company, the integration just worked and they launched it within 24 hours. So I think that like we win when we help customers get the first integration done, and then they actually see, holy crap, the next integration is even faster than this one, which was much faster than what we could have accomplished on our own. And so it's like we measure our success in terms of, are we helping you get integrations done fast? And are we helping you scale and sell into as many different property managers with different property management systems as possible? And if we're helping you move faster than you could on your own and rapidly scale across multiple systems that your customers are asking for, then everyone's winning.
That's awesome. Yeah, what a great story. All right. So as we wrap up here, I think at the summit, I'm pretty sure we asked you about hot takes, but I just love how you see things. And we typically like to ask people if they have any hot takes that they want to talk about. So is there anything that hits you where you're like, and a different way to think about this is if you weren't doing this today, Propexo, what else would you try to be solving in the industry?
Yeah. So, you know, one of my hotter takes. I don't know. Maybe Maybe this is a lukewarm take. You all can keep me honest how hot this is. I think, you know, when we came out, there weren't a lot of other companies doing what we're doing. But I actually think that you're starting to see the emergence of like real data infrastructure companies and Proptech. And what I mean by that is, you know, we came in saying we want to be the Zapier, we want to be like the Zapier, we want to be the Stripe, the Plaid. I'm starting to see other companies look for other opportunities to not just build point solutions that do a specific thing for a property manager, but they're looking at the overall ecosystem and saying, yo, there's a lot of companies that do that solve point solution problems. But what a lot of folks are asking for are solve some of the more fundamental issues that are more about the underlying data and the underlying ability to get value from the data you already have versus giving me another tool that I need to manage and integrate. So one thing that comes to mind, the groups at Bizzuto, so Daniel Paulino in particular, he's been pounding the table talking about how Bizzuto is using a CDP, how CDPs are really core to amazing marketing experiences. And just in the last few weeks, I've spoken with founders who are actively talking about building their own CDPs. So I wanted to give a shout out to the Highly team. I also want to give a shout out to the folks at Venn. I think that they're doing really exciting work. And that shift towards a CDP world, like if you come from outside of real estate, CDPs are the norm for tagging all your data, building and getting really great granular insights. I'm so excited to see that multiple groups are now saying, hey, we think that multifamily and Proptech are ready for a CDP solution. So that's like one of the hot takes. The fact that I'm seeing multiple groups all talking about the same thing, I think it's a great thing for the industry, and it's an indication that there's a growing acknowledgement that the industry just needs better tech, and better tech isn't a better point solution, but rather it's a better data solution.
Yeah, interesting. We're super friendly with Highly, but I didn't catch the second one. You called Venn?
Yeah, Venn, VENN.
Okay, we'll have to talk to them and get them on the show because we've had Robert on before from Highly, and they've been great to us, and it's super cool to see. I feel like they don't get enough credit for what they've built. Like what's under the surface versus what's on their website. I feel like it's way more impressive once you get like into it with them, and so that's more of. I don't know if it's a backhanded compliment or what, but I like the folks over there at Highly.
Yeah.
Just gets to the challenge again of educating an industry.
It's so hard.
And they haven't been effective there. And it's not being overly critical. It's just a reality. I agree with David. I think that they are under the radar, at least where they should be at this point. But it also gets into how big is the problem? How much do people recognize it? And then are people paying for it?
Yeah.
Or willing to? Yeah.
And I will say, Reid, like that's the thing when I think about the CDP, or even to a great extent what we're doing on the API side, it's really easy to go to a conference and tell someone, hey, I built a tool that helps you clear work orders 20% faster. I built a tool that helps you collect rent payments and earn some ancillary revenue on rent payments collected. Very tangible, but very tied to the fundamental aspect of what's happening in a building. I think it's more challenging to have a conversation saying, hey, I built a tool that tags a bunch of data in a bunch of systems, and then it allows you to do something with that data. Because I think that like, a lot of folks, they might not be as fluent with data, or really like, yes, okay, you've tagged all the data, but what do I do with it? And I think that the challenge for anyone who's going and building a CDP, or even us to a great extent, is being able to have that articulate a really clear vision of, well, once you've done this data thing, what is it that you're actually doing with it? What's the measurable impact on this multifamily business that I'm going to see by making that investment? In other industries where these technologies are a lot more mature, you don't have to do that sale because everyone sort of gets it and they've already bought into it. But I think that there's still a ton of education on why this matters in the first place that we still have to do. And it's really on us, the vendors who are trying to make these technologies more common spread. It's on us to be convincing folks that, yes, this creates impact. And that's not just by us saying that it creates impact, but really by us demonstrating and showing the performance that's being generated by implementing these tools in tech.
Remen, how fair? I'm not surprised, right, about your take, and I say that because, in fact, it connects. I think it was last week, but on the All In podcast, David Friedberg said that he's a little critical of Silicon Valley because he feels that a lot of companies are just building SaaS solutions that are way more point and shoot versus investing in deep tech or like. Health tech or energy tech, like these things where you basically have to take a leap of faith and beat like the laws of physics or something, where you have to have like this real like epiphany. And I can't blame it because building a company is hard enough, and let alone if you have a SaaS idea like you guys with rent payments and then you pivot, that's hard enough to survive, let alone look at our industry that is, there's a lot of stuff that's behind the modern times like CDP. And I bet, a good chunk of people listening to this probably don't even know what CDP is. And so if you just say, great, CDP for multifamily, now you have to teach the industry what CDP is. And then you have to teach them like, here's the things you could solve if you had that. And you got to build the darn thing. Right. So I'm taking the stance of like, I don't blame that we're here. We're here. I'm just wondering if you see it a different way. If you see it a different way.
No, I think you and I see it the exact same way. And I think that like this is one of the things that is the challenge, both the challenge and the opportunity. The lack of adoption of CDPs and other similar kinds of data infrastructure plays, despite the value that you see generated in other industries, means that there's a big blue ocean of opportunity out there. However, it's on us, vendors that want to be playing this tech game, to be selling the value delivered. You can't just walk into a room and say, you need a CDP because all these other companies have a CDP and therefore you should buy a CDP yourself. Rather, you have to be able to connect it and say like, hey, getting a concise view of the resident, being able to track their movement across buildings in your portfolio, understand the historical behaviors, use that to inform and use that to then create tangible value with things like renewal negotiations or incentivizing them to, when they move from city to city, don't go to luxury building A down the street, but come to the luxury building that you manage because you can actually deliver an experience that makes them feel recognized and seen and appreciated. I think that being able to paint a really clear picture of value delivered, that's how you sell this. But you can't lean on this is technology that other industries use, therefore you should use it too. And I think that if that's what you're defaulting to, it's gonna fall flat. Because as much as I want to say real estate is just like every other industry, there are some genuine unique differences. And I think that being able to acknowledge those differences but still be able to communicate the value of these technological innovations that have been deployed elsewhere. That's what being a founder is. It's about taking that vision, being able to translate it so it becomes tangible and real in the present.
Mm-hmm. Super interesting. I feel like I could keep riffing on this, but I know we're
I do too, and I have to force in this last because I think Dave and I could go another hour with you on this. My question, and I don't always do this, but sometimes, is imagine I'm the CEO at Entrata RealPage or Yardi, and I'm hearing this podcast and how I would be experiencing it. And more specifically, would I see your hot take in this, kind of vision and idea of more welcoming of CDPs, better data infrastructure, more Proptech companies popping up and being able to bring these types of solutions? Would you see that if you were them as a threat, as an opportunity, as both? So I just wonder if this is, I'll say successful, kind of this vision, or if it comes to fruition, not successful, how does that impact them? Because I think, fairly or not, most people point to them as the reason that we haven't had more progress, that, they've stymied innovation. They have a similar reputation, frankly, to somebody like Google or Facebook, who might stomp out some of the innovation and new solutions and technology because they see them as threats. Sometimes they just want to, acquire some of their technology. There's a variety of reasons that, outside of PropTech, that happens. What are your thoughts as far as how those big PropTech companies are seeing some of these potential changes?
Yeah. So, you can't, I would say that, you can't fight. You can't fight the wind. Like if you want to stand in the wind and be like, I refuse to acknowledge it. I mean, you can do that, but I think that there are some fundamental realities that even someone who is a senior executive at one of the large property management software, property accounting software companies would acknowledge. One, in multifamily, frequently you're not the only property management system used. You might have clients that are fluent in 2 or 3 different systems. 2, on a building by building level, the technology stacks can vary widely. So if you just take those 2 facts and you sort of appreciate it, what that would suggest is that there's going to be so many different pieces of technologies and tooling and data generated that it's going to be a very logical response for your ultimate customer that needs to make sense of all of this. If they're not building on a single stack, if they're not just buying all the Yardi or all the RealPage or all the Entrata, and they're mixing and matching with different tools and technology, tools that enable them to make sense of what's happening inside their portfolio, that's really an opportunity for you to prove the value of your technology. And it's not a direct threat because the reality is the CDP concept is predicated on the idea that there are multiple tools in a technology stack and you need to make sense of all the data that's coming through. If there weren't multiple tools, then everyone would be happy to just use one PMS and all the features that come with that PMS. But because that's not the world that we live in, encouraging your customers to be able to take advantage of your property management system really as a potential hub of all the tooling around it, but then be able to get the right data out of that system so then they can take action on that in conjunction with all the other tools and technology that they're using. I think that's how you really solve to make property owners and operators more successful and as a consequence, more loyal to working with you in the long term. Because if you don't adapt and if your laser focus isn't on making your customers happy, it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but there is a point in time when the customers are ultimately going to move over to the organizations that are prioritizing making them happy and more successful.
Totally agree. I think what you just said there at the end to me is the invisible tipping point. nobody knows exactly what it is, but we keep predicting it and feel like with all this new technology that's going to put enough pressure, frankly, on some of those big prop tech companies to be more supportive, embrace all the new solutions and technology that's coming. And maybe they're already adopted more of that mindset. I mean, it depends on who you talk to, but I think they did have the stigma, at least when we first got into the industry, of holding up that change. But now, again, maybe the invisible tipping point has been hit, and they're going to start being more proactive and trying to be enablers. And I'm not taking a position on this either way, because frankly, I haven't spent enough time, in the industry or with these technologies. To have a super strong opinion there. I'm just kind of sharing some of the sentiment that I feel like we've uncovered as we've spent time in multifamily, at least. So anyways, I love your thoughts though. And I hope you're right, Remen. I think that is how they should be thinking about it. And, if that's the case, then there should be some really great changes over the next few years in the industry.
Yeah.
Well, Remen, we really enjoyed the time today, as we always do with you. I feel like we'll at least get you twice a year, whether it's the summit and then 6 months after the summit, just because you're a good egg for us. So thank you for spending time with us. And if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about the company, how would you like them to do that?
Yeah, so you can find us online at propexo.com. That's propexo.com. And you can actually reach me directly via email. It's just my first name, Remen, Remen, at propexo.com.
Awesome. Or they could troll you on LinkedIn, it sounds like, because you're off to
Yeah. Actually, honestly, find me on LinkedIn. I'm hard to miss.
Yeah, cool. We'll put all that in the show notes. So, all right, Remen, thank you, man. We appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk.